Okay, my favorite tool right now is LinkedIn. If you're in the nonprofit world, which if you are listening to this show, I bet you are, LinkedIn for nonprofits is a game changer. Think free resources, exclusive discounts, tools designed just for you, all around hiring, donor outreach, building corporate partnership relationships, and building your dream community of supporters. And fun fact, 85% of nonprofit professionals say LinkedIn helps them reach their goals. So here's what I want you to do. Number one, follow me, Dana Snyder, on LinkedIn. I share monthly giving inspiration and nonprofit growth tips all the time. And follow LinkedIn for Nonprofits for the latest tools and strategies to grow your business page for your nonprofit and your personal account as well. Then head to nonprofit.linkedin.com to unlock your exclusive discounts and goodies. This podcast is proudly brought to you by LinkedIn for Nonprofits. Click the link in the show notes to learn more, and let's head into today's episode.
News kind of has this contagious element where, if one thing gets picked up, then more people want to pick you up. So it's definitely the one thing I think out of all of your marketing that really compounds. Whereas if you make, one social media post, it's kind of gone in 24 hours. But with PR, not only does it create a snowball effect, you're also gathering that precious SEO, which we all need because we don't own our platforms. We don't know when we're going to be shadow banned or the algorithm changes. So it's really important to really think about PR in a different way. It's not adding PR to your plate, but it's really the foundation for everything you can do.
I'm Dana Snyder, your host of the Missions to Movements podcast. And my path to philanthropy has been anything but traditional. This show is your weekly mastermind, designed to give you the ideas, insights, and support you need to push the boundaries of what's been done before in nonprofit marketing and fundraising. Whether you're looking to build a magnetic monthly giving program, elevate your personal brand, or create partnerships that amplify your impact, this space is for you. I'll bring you solo episodes and conversations with industry leaders, offering actionable strategies and fresh perspectives that will move you and your mission forward. Let's turn your mission into a movement. Okay, listeners, something I get asked about all the time is, how do we not be the best kept secret? How do we get the word out about our organization? How can our executive director or this person be featured? Or we just had this really great monthly giving program be released. How do we get it out into the news? What's newsworthy? Etc. All the things. So today's guest, Gloria Chou, is a former U.S. diplomat turned PR powerhouse, has literally helped thousands of small businesses and entrepreneurs get featured in some outlets you might recall, such as Forbes, the New York Times, Vogue, without needing a big agency or a Rolodex of media contacts. She is the founder of her own business, which I love, Gloria Chou PR, and the creator of the signature PR method that's helped her community land over 10,000 media features. Yes, you heard me correct. Her superpower is really teaching everyday business owners in this conversation, nonprofits, how to confidently pitch yourselves and share your story, because she believes every founder deserves to be seen and heard. I am really excited for this mini masterclass during this episode today. And I think something that I also love about your mission is that your work is really focused on making sure that women and the underestimated voices are part of the conversation. So thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me, Dana. I'm excited.
Yes. Okay. So I want to jump right in. You teach a pitch forward, no PR budget, needed approach to media, which I'm sure everyone is like, hallelujah, we're in the right place. What do you think are some of the biggest misconceptions that people have about getting featured in press?
I think the biggest one is that you need to be at a certain level of business, or you need to have a celebrity, endorsement or something to get featured. And the reason why we think that is because I think for the longest time, and still now, PR is very gatekept by the industry, right? That wants to charge you $5-10 grand a month for 6 months. And so because it's so gatekept, it just hasn't been accessible for the everyday founder of what is it that journalists want. And from working with so many journalists and from being a PR outsider, I've never worked a day in my life. In marketing or PR, I just started cold calling. I realized that journalists actually want to talk to the founder. They want to talk to you. They actually don't feel more impressed if there's like a publicist or a PR rep. And so how do we bring this in-house? How do we make it more feasible for a nonprofit is by doing this ourselves. And, it's not this big complicated thing. It's not about you being a newsworthy company or a nonprofit. There's no such thing, but there is such a thing as a good and a bad pitch. And so we're going to go into that is, how do we turn our marketing spiel into something that a journalist will care about? So that's the biggest misconception, is that there is such thing as like fundamentally newsworthy things and not newsworthy things. And it's just not true. Everyone, you can always get featured. You just need to know the right way to pitch.
Love that. I know. So my prior world, I lived in New York City and I worked for a pretty big PR firm, DKC. And I think it's so true of working. I didn't do the media side of things. I was on the digital team, but I saw it all the time. And then now having my own company for 8 years and just the scrappy way that I've gone about things can yield like similar success and getting featured where you want to in specific niches. And I think to your point, many organizations can feel like they don't have this buzzy, newsworthy story. But I think that's like a myth story that's being played in our heads. What are a few like simple angles or frameworks that you think about when it comes to turning like an everyday impact into something meaningful that media would want to cover?
Yeah, I think that as founders and, organizational leaders, we're always thinking about benefits and features for the end consumer, right? So in this case would be the donor. But the news is different, right? We have to think about what are the cycles, what are the seasons, and how can we piggyback on a bigger story? So instead of benefits and features, think about the season you're in. So is it Q1? Is it Q4? Think about your bigger, what's happening in the landscape. Like what is a trend that's happening with giving?
Yes.
Is there a bigger company that has gone back on their initiatives and you're saying, well, actually, we're actually going, for example, DEI is a huge one right now. And so talking about something that is in the news, something that's a little bit contentious, really using that to state like what your values are, that's also really big. Another one is I love data as well. So anytime you can pull your audience or do any kind of a quick survey, and that's proprietary data that you can offer to the journalists, right? So you can say, we surveyed our audience and here's a new trend that we're finding in giving. And that's really interesting because the journalist is not going to have time to do that surveying. I also love a contrarian point of view. So if everyone thinks that, in your industry, people are going this way, but then you're actually finding that, well, it's actually headed in a different direction. That's great. Pitch that. Anything that is regulatory with what's happening right now, like I said, DI is one of them, but what other companies are doing. So if there's a federal or a local kind of policy change that affects your industry, pitch that because that's always going to be relevant. Things on social media. So, what celebrities are doing, maybe what colleges are doing, all those things. So those are some really quick ways you can start to formulate in your head, well, what can I pitch that's not just all about me and what I'm doing, and really zoom out to what other people are covering. And so it's just about being relevant. And I always say having a good pitch is two things, is you need to be relevant, but you also make it very specific. So how can we peel away the layer of an onion? I always call pitching layer of an onion. The top layer is very fluffy. It's not very flavorful. So keep peeling away the layer of an onion to get to that really good, solid, juicy core, which is going to be a very specific and relevant pitch.
Yes. And you share a lot of good examples of this. So Gloria has her own podcast, since I know, listener, you're here listening to a podcast, Small Business PR. And in one of your recent episodes, you were talking about pitching around Mother's Day and getting a Mother's Day gift guides. And this is very topical for when even this episode is coming out. But even thinking about in a VIP intensive I'm doing right now, as an organization featured on really amplifying youth leadership. And so I was thinking about graduation, back to school, like moments when kids are just like really top of mind, and parents, and how can you get featured talking about like youth leaders, or there's so many cultural moments that are happening all around us, and think about those things that press are naturally wanting to hear stories about, and how can you be like, I'm going to make your job easier. Here's an amazing featured piece, or that can be included in what you're working on. So I love that you share these ideas all the time on your show too. So listener, if you want to like deep dive as like the year progresses on more of Gloria's ideas, you can check out her show. Big news right now through April 30th, LinkedIn is giving away 6 months free of Sales Navigator Core to the first 2,000 eligible nonprofit professionals around the world. If you want to apply, click the link in the show notes. You can also learn more at nonprofit.linkedin.com. And why does this matter? Because fundraising is the livelihood of nonprofit work, and connecting with the right donors, sponsors, and supporters is key. So with over 1 billion members on LinkedIn, connections are happening, and people on LinkedIn are more likely to donate to nonprofit organizations than the average internet user. So roles like Director of Development and Grants Consultant are on LinkedIn's 2025 Jobs on the Rise list. That is proof that fundraising and sustaining your missions are more essential than ever. LinkedIn for Nonprofits offers free tools, discounts, and a resource hub to help you raise awareness, grow support, and amplify your mission. So do not miss out. Go to nonprofit.linkedin.com/SNC giveaway, or just click the link in the show notes to claim your free 6-month subscription and start turning connections into contributions. Speaking of pitches, you have a method that's called the CPR Method. And can you walk us through how a nonprofit might use that to pitch to a local national trade outlet?
Yeah. From cold calling, again, I didn't have contacts. So I had to literally Google, newsroom, New York Times, and call with really sweaty hands and just get phone slammed in my face. But I started to pick up on patterns on when the journalist would be like, tell me more, right? Eventually I got my clients featured, in all the primetime TV shows. But the CPR method is a way to structure your pitch, because let's be honest, we're not born and no one's teaching us how to do this. It's a very radical act. It can be a very scary act to pitch to journalists. We're just not taught this. So don't be too hard on yourself if you're like, well, I didn't know this, because no one's really taught this. But from the years of pitching, I realized that if your pitch has these 3 elements, it's pretty solid. The whole point of the pitch is not to write the story for the journalist. It's just give them enough information to say that you are an authority on whatever topic, and that give them an idea of kind of possibilities and see where they go. They're the person writing it. So it's on them to write the article, but you're just giving them enough information. So C stands for credibility, P stands for point of view, and R stands for relevance. And the way I usually like to structure a pitch is you start with your subject line, because your subject line is the most important thing that dictates whether or not it gets open. So your subject line should not include your name, your company, or the word pitch. They already know that, and it's not going to be relevant to them. So instead, you almost want it to be kind of reading like a title of an article, right? So something like, the government is cutting funding for X, Y, and Z. Here's how we're helping. Or it could be like, 2025 research reveals that blank, blank, blank. Here's what we're doing. So it almost reads like it's specific, and it tells them exactly what it is. So don't bury anything. And then when you start off the email, avoid all the pleasantries. What you can do is you can compliment on their work.
So don't say, how was your weekend? How?
Yeah. Or a lot of times people will try to do a clickbaity subject line, like, oh, a message for you, Caitlin. It's like, well, they think it's spam. So you want it to be very direct and objective. And so you want to start off with whatever the relevance is. So maybe there is a new report or finding showing that youth of this population needs special help, right? And they're not getting it in public school. So maybe if you're doing something that's helping that, then put that there. So it could be data driven. Like I said, it could be about what's happening in the bigger landscape. You can say this Fortune 500 company is rolling back policies on DEI, but here's what we're doing to help marginalized folks, whatever that is. And then you go into your 3 points, which is a point of view. And it's usually about tips or insights or how you're helping. And then you conclude with 1 or 2 sentences about your credibility. So maybe if you've been featured before, any awards, anything that's unique about your story, why you're different as a nonprofit, why your approach is different, maybe your legacy or how many people you've helped. And, for more information, you can put a hyperlink in there. So don't attach these big attachments that's going to trigger their spam filter. Instead, I really like hyperlink, like find out more about us, find out more about this initiative. That's really the gist of it. If you are pitching for a podcast, which I know that a lot of people do, and we have a whole podcast training in our PR program, is instead of the 3 or 4 bullet points, I like to say, here are the questions I can answer on your podcast. And that's really great because you're doing the work for the podcast host. And bonus points, and this is from our mutual friend Ellen Yin, is if you can actually attach a screenshot of you giving that person's podcast a 5-star review, you'll separate yourself from 99.9% of the people who pitch, I promise. So those are all the ways to get on the radar. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. And it helps you turn your like me pitch into something that is more relevant to their audience, something that has to do with what's happening in the world right now, whether it's data backed or it's seasonal. For example, right now we're getting into graduation, right? So if you do something with helping youth perfect certain skills or maybe job placement, like that would be great, is to talk about unemployment. You can even pull up an unemployment report, the state
So
of
good.
jobs, right? Things like that. Or
Yeah.
housing. I know there's a lot with like housing rates and access to equitable housing with inflation and all the things. So if you're doing something with that, pull up the news. There's so much you can do
Yeah.
in the nonprofit sector that you can just easily reference what's happening in the news, because there's so many ways that people are struggling and so many ways that your nonprofit is helping to fill a really needed gap.
Yes. So this is no templatized press releases, is what I'm hearing. To not send that out to a journalist.
Well, you can send it out, but the email still needs to be a CPR method. You can say, since you cover this kind of news, I've attached the draft of our press release. But you don't want to just like give them a press release without context.
Context, yeah. Okay. Is there anything to sharing that you've read something similar to something that they've published, so that you show that you've kind of done a little bit of due diligence, or does that not matter?
That's actually the second tier of so I think about different tiers of effort, right? So the first tier is kind of what I told you, but a better way that probably get you even more on their radar is in the first paragraph with your relevance. If you can also say, I loved your article that you covered X, Y, and Z. It really inspired me. That's why I wanted to reach out to you, because we're doing this initiative.
Right.
So that's actually even better, because you're simultaneously showing them that you've done the work and you're giving them a compliment. And journalists, I mean, they're humans, right? So stroke their ego. Use social media. They're on social media as well. What I like to do is I teach this kind of follow-up method where you send an email and install an email tracking software, please. Like that way it'll tell you who's opening it, and you don't have to make up a drama in your head about them hating you. It's really not. Maybe it's a deliverability or out of office issue. And what I like to do is also follow up on social media and engage with their content and share it. And so that way you're kind of like your leads, right? You're omnipresent and you're having multiple touch points. And the good rule of thumb for following up is I like to follow up once a week, for 3 weeks. And if they're opening it and they're not responding, then it just means that there's not a place for it. But here's the thing, the news cycle and the content cycle, it's always evolving.
That's right.
So instead of just saying, hey, bumping this up, or hey, following up on this, you can reply to the same thread and in your follow-up, give them a compliment or say, hey, this is also happening in the news, or this is a new change, or you know what I mean? So with every follow-up, you want to give them something a little bit different to kind of freshen up the angle. And that way they can see kind of the thread of what you're pitching.
Yes. And from somebody who, and I'm sure you probably get these too, I get a ton of podcast pitches. I mean, I just got one right before we were about to jump on, and I quickly looked at it and I was like, none of this is relevant. And I could tell it was a copy and paste that had no customization to what my show was about. And when they do, you can just tell it's so much more thoughtful. And I immediately, sorry to the person, I deleted it, because there's no, you could tell there was no point and effort into reaching out about what the show is for. So it wouldn't be beneficial to that person either. It'd be like a waste of their time if it wasn't going to be actually helpful. Okay, so those were amazing tips. Do you have any specific stories where somebody landed coverage without a publicist or a big media list, and what made that pitch stand out? Is there any client that you've worked with where it was like, oh my gosh.
Every day we get something. So, I mean, we have someone who's working, she's a Southern educator. So she's used to be a school teacher, and she published a book, and her whole thing is about unconscious bias in AI. And so again, I kind of like that because it's kind of a contrarian angle. So we use a CPR pitch and to not really talk about her book, right? That's kind of more self-promotion, but about the ways that AI is advancing the rights of some people, but then also discriminating against others. And she got featured right away in a national science journal. We also have someone who has a nonprofit, and it's basically to get rid of fast fashion and to make fashion more sustainable.
Oh my gosh. Woman of my own heart, whoever that is.
Yeah. And she got featured on ABC News because she was doing this thing around Q4 when people tend to do a lot of consumerism, a lot of over consumerism. And so she was doing a way to give back for people who, you can recycle your clothes instead of throwing them into the landfill.
So good. I actually had a thought of all the Mother's Day guides that are coming out, where I was like, instead of just another thing that organizations could pitch, a monthly giving program. Give your mom a gift every single month that gives back. And it's a totally different appeal. And you could have it be for a cause that's close to her heart. And it's like, I'm sure that's not what's getting pitched. It's mostly listicle things of your bags or clothing or something. And it's such a different twist. So I don't know by the time this comes out, the end of April, if that's still going to be relevant for hitting some of these newsstands. But for any types of listicles like that, if you have a little bit more of like a long lead time frame, which I guess is another question, does there need to be weeks and months in advance in the digital news cycle, or is that just mostly still for print?
Yeah, so print is going to be like 3 to 6 months in advance, but for digital, they can turn it around very quickly. There's also a lot of like last minute gift guides, right? And also like after Christmas, how do you spend your gift card? So I would say don't pitch more than 6 weeks in advance, but kind of the 4 to 6 weeks before holiday is usually the sweet spot. So as the time that we're recording, it's beginning of April. And this is actually the perfect time to start pitching. And I actually would say, if you do have something that's local, a hometown story that's really feel good, and you have especially a local community or organizational give back angle, call your local newsroom. Like, you would be surprised. They are looking for these people this feature. And we had someone who makes like a subscription box for one snack and one book. And she actually gives back to local hunger initiatives. And she got featured on local TV like 3 or 4 times just because she led with that angle, right? Based on Q4 hunger drive. So I think that you should definitely, everyone listening, if you do have something that gives back to a local initiative or you partner with a local organization, pick up the phone and call the newsroom. And I know it's like a scary thing, but they won't bite, I promise. And I've gotten so many people featured just by calling. And you can say something like, hey, are you doing any stories featuring local organizations that give back or hometown heroes? And most of the time they will say yes, and they'll give you the email for the person who is the decision maker. So usually it's like the producer or the editor, and you just email them the pitch using the CPR method, and you follow up, and boom, it's just a matter of when are you going to do the segment, you know? So
amazing. This is so good. If you've been feeling like your monthly giving program could use a little extra love, there's a couple of ways I would love to help you out. Whether you're looking for some one-on-one attention or want to be part of a supportive community, I've got you covered. So here's the deal. If you feel like you need a solid game plan, one that's tailored to your organization, I'd love to spend 1.5 days with you in a VIP intensive. We'll roll up our sleeves together, dive into everything from creating a compelling monthly giving program name if you need it, to crafting a retention strategy, acquisition that really connects with your donors. It's all about being alongside you in what you need in that moment, optimizing your donation experience, new copy on your website page. We dive into the nitty gritty. And one recent client said that it was the best investment they ever made in a transformative experience, which I was so grateful to hear. If you're someone who thrives off bouncing ideas off of others, then the Sustainers Slack group is where you should be. It's basically like a virtual co-working space for nonprofit professionals where you can get real-time feedback. I have monthly experts that come in and just be supported by peers who get it. We are talking about nothing besides monthly giving in there. There's a ton of useful resources to help you grow your recurring giving program without feeling like you're doing it on your own. So whether you're looking for that deep dive into strategy and execution together, or you'd love just to connect with others that are deep into the trenches, I would love to help you work on your monthly giving program this year. So click the link in the show notes for either of those opportunities, or head to positiveequation.com. So let's just say that someone's listening right now and they're like, okay, I want to get featured on a podcast, in a digital outlet, on our local news. What do you think is the very first thing that they should work on today?
Well, they need to find the angle. So what is the actual angle for what you're trying to pitch? Is it Q4? Is it Mother's Day? Is it, whatever that is? So use the CPR method to flesh out your pitch first. What is the angle? Is your town devastated by a hurricane or a lack of funding, whatever that is? And then if that is the angle, then you're going to call and lead with that.
So good. And I think what we forget is, I remember when I worked at a nonprofit, when I first started my work, we did something once and then it got syndicated and picked up on all these other channels. And people are like, I'm seeing you on this and this. And I was like, you are? How? And I didn't understand what it was at the time. But you have to remember, because now news is this 24/7 news cycle, they are always needing to fill time slots. So I heard
Yes.
people, it was like, you were on at 11 p.m. and then it was 7 a.m. And then I was like, what? You never know. And a lot of the news stations have this syndication where it's passed along multiple online news websites, not just the television stations. So you never know that trickle effect that happens when you get placed one place, that they're going to use it across multiple other channels for visibility.
100%. Yep. And so that's another myth. It's like, oh, well, if I've been featured once and I'm not going to be featured again, it's absolutely not true. News kind of has this contagious element where, if one thing gets picked up, then more people want to pick you up. So it's definitely the one thing I think out of all of your marketing that really compounds. Whereas if you make, one social media post, it's kind of gone in 24 hours. But with PR, not only does it create a snowball effect, you're also gathering that precious SEO, which we all need
Yes.
because we don't own our platforms. We don't know when we're going to be shadow banned or the algorithm changes. So it's really important to really think about PR in a different way. It's not adding PR to your plate, but it's really the foundation for everything you can do, because you can have one article or one podcast and you can turn that into 20 different pieces of content for social media. That's a much smarter way to do it than to just grind your gears on social media all day and you don't even know if you're ever going to get to the right people.
1,000,000%. And I think what's so valuable is, listener, you as nonprofit leaders, you are a subject matter expert in the cause area that you are focused on. And you might not realize that you have so many blogs, webinars, presentations you've given. Look at those for some angles and how they can be relevant to today, because journalists, press are looking for those experts to plug into pieces. Maybe it's not today, but they might save you as a reference to be quoted later down the line. And they're going to look for those experts. So make sure that your voice is known so that when they're thinking about it, they can find you. One last question before I head into my ask and receive section: contact information. I know people are like, okay, I see the New York Times of the world or even our local paper. How do you find who to email and the actual address?
I'm glad you said that, because people make PR seem so complex. But from what I found, if you boil it down, PR is really simple. It's writing a good pitch, right? Using the CPR method and knowing who to send it to. So we talked about what to write with the CPR method. Now let's talk about the second half of the equation, which is who to send it to. And it's not going to be, editor@vogue.com or, info at. What you want to do is focus on who has written before about your industry.
That's right.
And, it might not be, there's no such thing as like a nonprofit writer, but it might be the labor reporter, right? If you're doing something with labor, it might be the economic reporter. So think about what's the industry beat that the journalist is most likely to cover you. If you do something local, it could be the metro, we call it like Metro New York, which means like all things happening in the local New York City. So now you might be asking, okay, well, how do I find these journalists? So there's a couple things. First, I want you to install a Google News Alert, which is free. You just type in the search bar, Google News Alert, and it pings you with all the stories, the digital stories about your keywords. And so what you can do is you can copy and paste the journalist's name and their email. A lot of times it's public information, and you can start to create your own ever-growing list of media contacts.
Smart.
That's the first thing. The second thing is you can sign up for sourceofsources.com, which is like the new Haro, which was help a reporter out. That's no longer. So Source of Sources, you sign up to be a source and you get emailed 3 times a day with up to 20
I have
different
this.
inquiries from journalists. And it could be anyone. So, you might be a nonprofit leader, but you can also speak to whatever industry you're in, whether it's energy, parenting, education. So think broadly, not just, oh, well, they're not looking to interview a nonprofit person, but you might be an expert in economic policy, right? Or education. So that could be for you as well.
I have an example of this as we're going through it. So I just want to give an example on this like SOS media queries. What it is like they have different topics. I just opened it up on my phone right now as an example. They have a beauty and wellness, which you might think is not nonprofit. However, what it says is the importance of outdoor play for children and teens. Okay. I know so many organizations that could probably talk to the importance of outdoor play and have a whole bunch of stats for this. When you click on it, it gives you the name, the email, what the outlet is, the website, and the query. Literally, I am reading this and I can think of so many nonprofits that I know in my mind that could send an email to be qualified for this. Another one, group chat safety for tweens and teens. This is for Verizon. Y'all, you are credible to talk about so many of these. Share your thoughts on improving workforce accountability. Like,
there's a one on DEI because I got that today too. If you're an HR leader in DEI, yeah.
Yes, I see that one too. Yeah, so this is it's free. I don't remember. What's the website for it? I can put it in the show notes.
Source of Sources. So SOS, sourceofsources.com.
Source of Sources. Okay, perfect. We'll do that. Sorry, I cut you off midway, but I wanted to share literally we're not blowing smoke.
Yeah. So the first one again is a Google News Alert. Install that. The second one is what you said what we said, Source of Sources. The third one that I've been doing a lot of training around in my PR community is Substack. So a lot of freelance journalists now are using Substack, which is like a private blogging, like a WordPress, to reveal to them what stories they're writing on before anyone else finds out. And I get people featured in 24 hours just by answering to journalist Substack. So whether you're in beauty, fashion, policy, economics, follow these journalists and they will always have a section of here are the stories I'm working on for this week. They'll tell you exactly what it is. And again, you can answer to that. And that's always really good. And the thing about Substack is that it's free. And of course, they're going to want you to upgrade to paid, but an ethical journalist will never keep that behind a paywall. So you can just keep the free subscription. Obviously, if you want to support the journalist, you can upgrade to a monthly. They're usually anywhere from $6 to $12 a month. So it's not an exorbitant amount.
Yeah.
So I follow a lot of those journalists. The fourth one is to follow hashtags on social media. So on X, which is formerly Twitter, and on LinkedIn, you can just follow hashtags like nonprofit or giving or whatever. And a lot of journalists, remember, they're writers. So you can just type in the search box and find who are the people who are writing. You can do the same on Instagram too, because if they're a journalist, you'll actually be able to see under their name that they're a journalist or a writer.
Yeah. And
they'll tell you, here are the outlets that I write for. And it's great to use that time. You're already on social media watching animal videos or cooking videos.
Yes.
Maybe divert some of that to actually connect with journalists. And they love it if you can engage with their content. And most of them, I would say 99.9% of them, they're very friendly. And so they'll be able to answer you on DMs if you use the CPR method. So it's not like an annoying way, but it's kind of about how you can add value. Always think about how you can add value to their readers. They're looking for ways to interpret new policies. They're looking for ways to interpret insights and data and discover new things to help people make sense of what's happening in the world. And you are a conduit of information.
That's right.
So step into that frequency.
Amazing. I mean, mic drop right at the end. Gloria, thank you so much for being here. I always like to ask, what is one thing that you would like to ask for help or support on?
Oh, thank you so much for including me. I think for me, PR, at the end of the day, it's not about the logos and the SEO. It's really sacred work to me because I think for so many of us, we're just not really seen in media. And it's just the same people over and over. And so how do we make it accessible so that we can have more people from all walks of life, all lived experiences, and showcase their story? And so this is really sacred work for me. And so if you know anyone who also believes that, watch my free PR masterclass. Go to gloriachoupr.com/masterclass. Follow me on Instagram. And, I share a lot about my story. I actually got shadow banned because I was talking about DEI. So all of the things and my personal story as well. And I'm at Gloria Chou PR. That's Gloria CHOUPR. And if you actually DM me the word Dana, you'll get another pitching freebie to start your journey.
Hey.
Yeah. So that you can start filling out your own CPR method and tons and tons more. So that's really my ask is how can we get more people featured? And if you're someone and you know that your story deserves to be featured, then you owe it to yourself to really be your number one advocate. And of course you can take this in-house, right? You can hire an intern or assistant, but knowing how to pitch and knowing how to be your advocate is really the number one skill everyone should have.
So good. Amazing. Thank you so much for all you do in telling your story and starting your business and helping all of the amazing entrepreneurs and owners that you have and everybody here listening today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode of Missions to Movements. If you enjoyed our conversation and found it helpful, I would love for you to take a moment to leave a review wherever you're listening. Your feedback helps us reach more change makers like you and continue bringing impactful stories and strategies to the show. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button too, so you'll never miss an episode. And until next time, keep turning your mission into a movement.